Prime Minister Turnbull's very kindly agreed to answer questions. Usual House rules, no question too outrageous. You just have to say your name and organisation first. Do I see any openers? Gentleman there.
Oh, hello, how are you? Good to see you again.
Prime Minister, you said that Britain could learn a lesson from Australia on immigration. What lesson can Britain learn from Australia on your very successful negotiation of comprehensive free trade agreements with China and other major nations?
You've just got to get the deals done, Matt. It's, I mean, Britain hasn't done a free trade deal or trade deal for a very long time, not since it joined the European Union. So there's obviously plenty of work to do to get the negotiating teams and the talent you need to do it. But basically, if you believe, as your government does, as I believe both sides of politics do in Britain, from what I've heard, that Britain needs to find as many open markets as it can, then you just have to get on and negotiate them. And look, there's plenty of... The chill winds of protectionism are blowing around the world in various places, some more strongly than others. But I firmly believe that protectionism is not a ladder to get you out of the low-growth trap. It's a shovel to dig it much deeper.
Gentleman there.
Hey.
Name and organisation.
Prime Minister James from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age newspapers. Thanks for your speech, of course. And I'd like to pick up a point you made about Sir Robert Menzies founding a Liberal Party, which I'm willing to guess is not going to go unnoticed back home. Can I ask, do you believe that Menzies' legacy...
I hope that people have noticed that he founded the Liberal Party.
Indeed.
You're reflecting very adversely on the historical education of Australians.
Indeed. Indeed, PM. Can I ask, do you believe that Menzies' legacy, and indeed that your government's agenda, is in danger of being hijacked by the Conservative wing of your party? Why have you made this point?
Look, no, I think it's very important, as I said in my remarks, and indeed using a phrase Tony Abbott, as the first person I heard use it in our party anyway, the sensible centre. The path for our party was set by Menzies when he brought together both the Liberal and Conservative traditions, and of course these labels have been much debased, in the social media outrage cycle of today. But he brought together those traditions. John Howard described it as a broad church. They are brought together, and indeed they're shared by most of us. Share both traditions. They're not exclusive. But the important thing was to set the party as a party of progress, indeed of innovation. Menzies gave a speech in 1966, I recall, where he talked about innovation even more often than I normally do, James. So there's nothing new about Liberal Prime Ministers talking about innovation. But the focus has got to be on delivering for the people you represent. And pretty much in any policy area, I mean, I often talk about this in the area of energy, ideology is a very poor guide to policy. The focus has got to be on getting results, and so that's why I say, with respect to energy, for example, my best guides are engineering and economics, not ideology and politics.
Name and gentleman there. Name and
Michael, good to see you again. Thank you so much for coming.
You are in an unrivaled position to assess the role which China wants to play in the world, and the way in which we should respond. What insights can you share with us?
Well, look, I think, Michael, that's a big question. I mean, let me deal with the first part of it. What China, the Chinese people and Chinese leaders, including obviously Xi Jinping, see themselves as being restored to the level of preeminence that is really the natural order of things. The Deng Xiaoping summed it up very well when he went south he had a southern tour in the late 70s, as they started to open up China to the world. If you go back 40 years, China was wasn't a closed economy, but it represented only a few percent of global GDP. And he went down there and he talked about the great Chinese navigator, Zheng He, about, I think in the 1500, who set off on these great voyages across the Indian Ocean and, you know, through what we now call Indonesia and India and so forth, all around that area. And subsequent emperors closed China to the world. And Deng Xiaoping said, in the days of Zheng He, when we were open to the world, we were strong. When we closed ourselves off, we became weak and subject to foreign domination and oppression, invasion and so forth. And so what the leaders have been doing is seeking to restore China to the prosperity that gives it naturally the preeminence that its population, nearly a quarter of the world's population, inevitably entails. In terms of how Britain should deal with China, it should deal with China as we do, honestly, frankly, openly. We have an honest engagement, a very candid engagement. There are some areas some areas where we would like China to do more. And the obvious one that both Teresa and I talked about today is with North Korea. That is that reckless and dangerous regime is putting the peace of the region and the world at risk. And while we don't suggest that they're doing China's bidding at all, I mean, it is not East Germany. It's not like East Germany was to the Soviet Union. This is a very unruly neighbour. But nonetheless, China has the greatest leverage, the greatest ability to bring that regime to its senses without military force, and we are strongly urging the Chinese leadership to do that.
I don't want to be accused of geographic discrimination, so at the very back I see somebody's hand is up. Name and organisation, please.
Prime Minister Robert Wright from the Financial Times. You're currently seeking free trade deals with the UK, which represents, I think, a very small proportion of your GDP and can't do a deal immediately, and a deal with the European Union, which is one of the world's two great trading blocs. I wonder how you think about how you allocate resources and the sense of urgency between doing these two deals. Well,
I met with the presidents of the European Council and Commission, Mr. Tusk and Mr. Juncker, just in Hamburg a few days ago, and we agreed that we would do all we could to reach an agreement on Australia-European free trade agreement before Brexit. In fact, the aim is to get it done before 2019. Now, those people who are sceptical about the efficiency of bureaucrats and negotiators may feel that's ambitious, but that's what we're going to seek to do. So that's the first priority. But then when Britain is free to deal after it leaves the European Union, we'll be negotiating as quickly as we can, and we can, I can assure you, negotiate multiple free trade deals at one time. We've demonstrated that. I mean, the China, Korea, Japan free trade deals of the last few years were all they were all being negotiated simultaneously, and we have quite a few others on the go at the moment. Indeed, at the G20, the president of Indonesia, Joko Widodo, or Jokowi as he's generally known, he and I agreed that the trade deal that we're negotiating between Australia and Indonesia, which is called the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, or CEPA, IA-CEPA, that our goal is to get that done by the end of the year. Now, that is very strong commitment and leadership on his part and my part, but I think it gives you an indication that we just want to forge ahead. I mean, I make no bones about this. The more doors to more markets I can open for Australian business to enter, the better. That's my goal. Free trade and open markets are a big part, a huge part of our 26 years of uninterrupted economic growth.
Gentleman there, name and organisation.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Andrew McLeod, Committee for Melbourne.
How are you?
Sorry, used to be Committee for Melbourne, King's College, I should say.
Right.
You talk about opening up markets. Now, Australia was a leader in creating APEC, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, and one of the great positives from that is the APEC Business Travellers Card.
Yeah.
Now that Britain will be leaving the United Kingdom, is there a role that we could perhaps look at creating an APEC Business Travellers Card system in the Commonwealth to encourage trade in the Commonwealth, and is that something that Australia and Britain could perhaps do?
Well, it's something we'll certainly put. We can certainly put that on the agenda. But again, we want to do everything we can to facilitate trade and trading opportunities for Australian businesses, and of course for foreign businesses to do business with Australia. So it's that's our position. It's very, very, very clear. So the more opportunities, the better.
Gentleman there, been waiting patiently. Name and organisation.
Harvey Odds, London Borough of Hackney. Firstly, I'd just like to say that my youngest son is one of those people you mentioned in your address who is an Australian citizen with foreign parentage.
Yeah.
But, Mr Prime Minister...
Well, he's not Robinson Crusoe.
No. No. Well, you spoke about the importance of combating extremist Islamic terror in many ways. In your role as a neighbour and a fellow member of the Commonwealth of New Zealand, next time you meet Bill English, do you think it would be possible to persuade him that his government's actions in UNESCO are undermining that role end? Well,
thank you. I will, as Chris Uhlmann's friend at the ABC, Tony Jones, would say, I'll take that as a comment, and I'll reflect on it. I don't know enough about the matter you're referring to, so thank you.
I see lots of other hands up. Gentleman there, yes, name and organisation.
I'm from the Chinese Embassy. Good evening, Prime Minister. It seems to me that the British government is pretty receptive to the Belt and Road Initiative. And the Chancellor Hammond said that China and the UK are natural partners because China is the eastern side and the UK is the western side of this, the Euro-Asian, the initiative. So what's the position of the Australian government? I feel that you are a little bit hesitant. Do you consult each other on how to work together with China or with the world on the Belt and Road Initiative? Thank you.
Well, there was a big conference in Beijing recently, Belt and Road Conference. Our Trade Minister, Stephen Chobo, attended it. There is a lot of investment, Chinese investment in Australia. We have a very strong relationship with China. It goes well beyond economics, as you know. There's a lot of Australian business in China. Lucy and I, more than 20 years ago now, actually established a zinc mine in China. So I've been an investment in Chinese mining. Actually, the most mining investment is coming the other way. So look, from our point of view, we assess all foreign investment on its merits. It's much easier to invest in Australia as a foreigner than it is, for example, to invest in China as a foreigner. We're a very open economy. We welcome investment, and but we look forward to deepening ties and links in that regard and in other respects as well. So I think the relationship is very strong and getting stronger.
Gentleman there in the middle, there, halfway down.
Thank you. Rory Broomfield from the Freedom Association. You mentioned immigration in your speech with reference to security, but given that we are leaving the European Union, the United Kingdom's leaving the EU, another freedom that we'll have is reframing our immigration policy to the rest of the world. I wondered what thoughts and recommendations you could give to our Home Secretary on reframing our new immigration policy.
Well, everyone gives me advice how to run Australia. I'm not going to tell anyone else how to run their countries. But look, I just refer you to what I said in my remarks, that I think controlling your borders is absolutely critical. You have to, I mean, John Howard summed it up once when he said, we decide who comes to Australia and the circumstances in which they come. And, you know, it is absolutely, demonstrably the right thing to do. You have to be in a position where whoever comes across your border, whether they be a business migrant, whether they be a student, you know, coming to do a course at a university, whether they're a humanitarian entrant, a refugee, the government must make that decision on behalf of the people whose country it is. It's a fundamental incident of sovereignty. And so when you outsource your borders, you outsource your sovereignty. So it is, and that enables you, if you control your borders, as we have not, there has not been one successful people smuggling venture to Australia in more than 1,000 days. If you can control your borders and maintain that integrity, then you have the social licence to have a generous migration program, including a generous humanitarian program, as we do, one of the world's largest on a per capita basis. So it's, look, this is not a theoretical proposition, you know. Kevin Rudd, no relation to the Home Secretary, Kevin Rudd actually did drop Howard's policies, and we know what happened. So there is no question, you've got to be able to control your borders. Now, I'm not saying it's obviously, different countries and geography and so forth can make that more or less difficult, but it's absolutely critical, and I think that's, you know, I know that well, I'll let the Home Secretary express her own views on this, but I have no doubt that she believes that Her Majesty's government, in right of the United Kingdom, should determine who comes to this country, these islands, and nobody else.
One final question. Sorry to disappoint anybody. Gentleman in the second row there. Name and organisation, please.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Mac Chitty, recently retired commander with the Metropolitan Police. I'm not deliberately trying to take the debate away from free trade or immigration, but I just wanted to return to terrorism. What really struck a chord with me was your description of actually these terrorists have got nothing to offer in this life, and that's why they focus on the afterlife. I think those sort of messages need to be driven home, and needs to be more focus and concentration, especially within establishments like mosques, to talk more about the life and their responsibilities here. But sometimes we get from a small minority quite a disproportionate response back into the public, which frightens a lot of middle mainstream Muslim communities in particular. How has your message been received in Australia, and what's the response been from your communities across your nation?
Well, look, every time I talk about this issue, I talk about inclusion. The points I've made tonight, the Australians in the audience have heard many times. It is, the terrorists are the ones that want to divide us. You know, we must not become, you know, amplifiers for their poisonous propaganda. So they have to be called out. It is this Islamist, terrorist, extremist movement, or I'm not sure whether that's a philosophy. There's hardly much philosophical about. Ideology is probably the best word. This Islamist, extremist ideology is as we know, it is blaspheming and destroying Muslim societies, or seeking to destroy Muslim societies, and the vast majority of their victims around the world are Muslims, as you know. So so we have to support those who make the case for inclusion. We have to give them the solidarity that they deserve and they need, and that's why I'm always delighted to be with Joko Widodo. You know, there he is. Jokowi is the democratically elected leader of the largest majority Muslim country in the world, and he stands there and says, he's got plenty of critics, of course, as all politicians do, but he says Indonesia proves that Islam, moderation, tolerance and democracy are compatible. It's a very, very powerful message, and I always encourage him to speak more on the world stage. Jokowi is one of the great leaders of our times, believe me. He is such an extraordinary example in this particular battle. He's a really powerful advocate for the values that we all share and that you, I know, in your service in the Metropolitan Police, for which I know everyone thanks you, and I do too, for your that you've always embodied too. So, is that all, I think? Thank you very much indeed.